Nice
A long time.
Baby call.
Yeah. So that it would be a brand.
Yeah, she wasn't just trying to push the baby out. I'm so glad it didn't happen.
I'll take it. I just wonder what do they put on the sign? If we. That's what I'm asking. We have a high school. They're just getting to the time.
And he's committed to go straight back.
All there is. Everything
Mailboxes next to the.
You beat me to it.
It's the first Tuesday, but also our election day. So we have to come back. The first and third. This is one of four.
Call this meeting to order at 6:01. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, approval of treasurer's warrants, payroll warrants for April 8th, 2022 and April 15th, 2022. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve. Second.
Any questions or discussion?
It's a hard thing.
Calling for a vote, all those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Accounts payable warrants for April 12th, 2022 and April 19th, 2022. Open for motion.
I move to approve. Second.
Any questions or discussion?
I'm gonna put this on there now. Okay.
Calling for a vote. All those in favor? 5-0, motion passes. Approval of the minutes first for April 5th, 2022. Open for a motion.
I move to approve the minutes as written.
A second. Any questions, discussions, edits? Corrections? Seeing none. Calling for a vote, all those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Approval of the minutes of April 12th, 2022. Open for motion.
I move to approve the minutes as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Kim?
I had to leave early that night. How much happened after, I left after we voted on all of the items?
Yeah.
Like, did you guys wrap up right after that, or was just deciding if I should stay or not?
You're asking.
You left about 20 minutes before, I think, this wasn't it like 6:30?
Okay.
I think the only discussion that happened after that was when Forrest stood up and wanted to know, putting
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
the dollar stuff off.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Calling for a vote, all those in favor? Against, abstain, 401, Kim's abstaining. We do not have any special presentations or awards. Down to committee appointments, cemetery committee, Mark Light for reappointment, Steve Christensen reappointment, and Becky Applin reappointment. Open for a motion.
I move to reappoint each of the members for committees as listed.
Second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, calling for a vote, all those in favor? 5-0, motion passes. There's a correction for this one. Richard Blitz to the broadband committee, not the appeals board, is already on the appeals board.
I saw
So open for motion.
I move to appoint Richard Blitz to the broadband committee.
And I second.
Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, calling for a vote, all those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Public hearings, liquor license for Wiscasset Farmers Market at 51 Bath Road. Open for a motion to open the public hearing.
I move to open a public hearing for liquor licenses at farmers market.
Second. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. The public hearing is open at 6:06. Is there anyone who would like to speak in reference to the farmers market liquor license? And Jan, if you just don't mind stating your name for the folks online.
Dan Sorwell, resident of Wiscasset. I'm the treasurer of the Wiscasset Farmers Market. The liquor license is for selling closed containers of hard cider that are made and owned by Tin Cup, a new brewery in the winery. So it's something that's done at other farmers markets, that farmers market, Tuesday farmers market, all have either a winery or brewery that's part of the farmers market. So we're asking, it needs municipal approval, of course. And that's what we're asking.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public before we close the public hearing? Okay, open for motion.
I move to close the public hearing.
I second.
All those in favor? Public hearing is closed at 6:07 p.m. Open for motion.
Wow, that was fast.
I move to approve the farmers market liquor authorization for Wiscasset Farmers Market located at 51 Bath Road.
I second.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Okay, opening up for a public comment on non-agenda items. If you do have a comment on anything that is not on the agenda, if there's something on the agenda you want to speak to, we will have time for public comment at that time. But if there's anything that's not on the agenda that you'd like to speak to, please make your way up to the mic. Checking one. Going once, going twice. All right, moving on then. Department head or committee chair, we have our department head monthly reports, and Dwayne sent his via email as well, about an hour ago, maybe. Any questions or discussion from the board? No? Okay, thank you as always for the very complete reports. All right, coming down to 9A, unfinished business, main art gallery lease. I know we have a updated version from today. Correct.
Right. Did everybody get it?
From today?
Yes.
Over email.
So this one's no longer, I didn't see the one today.
Okay.
Is it
I can look
probably
online.
in our folder?
No.
The folders are week folders.
Yeah.
The folders are several from Thursday probably. That's not a whole week. Unless it's in my life and then it's like a week and a half. But I can look online here. There's a lot of stuff here.
Jim?
I would like to see a copy of the updated version. Having worked against the other.
He's gonna print a bunch of
I'm
copies.
going to print off some.
Is it the Magley's feedback doc?
Yeah.
That is,
I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Was
Yes.
Was that what it was called?
Mhm.
Yeah.
11.
We can speak for the changes also.
Has the newest revision been sent to me? Excuse me, it's a title matter response. Is that the newest one?
It's from 11:01 a.m. this morning, Maggie's feedback, forward from Jim.
I know that there are some changes there. Maybe they could just-
Sorry, I just want everybody to have it
Oh,
before you start explaining.
Absolutely, totally.
I'm just making sure that this is the right one. It's the one that I downloaded this morning.
It has 3 colors on it.
Yeah, the green is the new. We had received some changes and then we took a day to react and send those back, what had happened.
So if you see green on there, that's the correct version.
Actually, that's the word. We have to look at it.
Thank you for your patience. Lorraine.
Yeah, sorry guys. That's sorry guys. Yeah.
Well, you know, Dan had just brought a case of one of those things and he just got us to approve. That was-
Have you been here yet?
No.
Oh,
I've
it's so
heard it.
nice. It's really nice. Those were the owners who left, but
Oh,
John and
okay.
Johnny, they're also super nice.
Still the green running is different. Is that correct?
While we're waiting on that, when I find a typo, is this as good a time as any to bring it up? I mean, it needs to be fixed before it's approved, yeah.
Oh, date, 2043.
The thing is, it's right in the middle of a paragraph, and you know, good luck to me, you have to count the lines.
Wondering why do we have some, sort of like some jet, inkjet coming back in? Like, what is it now?
It's a brand new.
Is it?
Which one's good?
The one in the closet there.
That's new?
Yeah, because the other one died.
But the anachronism, it took me 5 minutes trying to get it to turn on and it still hadn't finished loading.
That's too much. Wow. I've never understood this is an ongoing method with my printers and copiers. It's like we got up to a certain point in technology and then just decided we weren't gonna get any better. They're terrible. All printers are.
I mean, literally, you push the button, it's lit up.
Paper jams anymore.
I know.
Right? I'm 17 feet of space.
Other than the bag, I mean, people have put their stuff on it. And we go into a couple pages. And have to stay on.
We forgot again. What a cake from you.
Well, yeah.
I've got more coming.
Thank you, Michelle, I'm so sorry. Yeah, and
Oh my God, it's true. That's all I need. I'm glad I'm here for you.
all right, Harry, would you like to speak to the changes?
Yeah. Yes. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, everyone, for your patience. And this has been a long process for all of us. And again, I think I just want to start with kind of just capping why we're even here and why we did this, which is a year ago, as I came on with the gallery, and we had a main objective of upgrading the building and doing the maintenance to the building. And we found that the grants, and the big grant that David Polk had written, just wasn't accepted because we weren't the owner or we didn't have a long-term lease. So our initial objective here was just to get a 20-year lease so that we could write the grants. And it would be no cost to the town. And for instance, in 2011, we spent $25,000 on the roof that we did. And this year we're spending $25,000, both grant monies and contributions from the gallery. So that's $50,000 over 10 years. So think about it. And a group that's really making a lively, interesting, educational nonprofit center in the town. So as we came to the final, what we hope is our final review of this lease. What occurred was, David Pope, who's been involved with the gallery for years doing our maintenance, came to me and said, what is this? He said, I'm really nervous because this is putting the gallery as if we're the owner. We would be responsible for absolutely everything. And we're not the owner, we're tenants. And we're actually agreeing to effectively pay rent as tenants. So the changes in here primarily, well, we fixed the date on item 2. You'll see in green, we just clarified the language on applying the grant funds to a rental cost and fee. And then we agreed to all of the maintenance, regular maintenance, where we had concerns and where we changed the languages primarily at the end of 9. And Richard, please jump in if I don't. Yes, Richard's going to jump in. He's our attorney on the board and he did most of these, so I'm going to let him finish reviewing the changes.
My name is Richard Reese. I'm a resident of Wisconsin and on the board. I would like to clarify that I'm not practicing. Everybody likes to use that label, but, I don't want to be mistaken as being the main bar. I was admitted to DC. That's I think it's probably help all of us if we just go through the differences between what was posted and we here and just quickly get everybody up to speed on those things so we're not missing anything. So if you start first the color under the term, we were going along with the black, so we just filled in and we do. We're so close. We'd like to create a start date of April 1 wherever we pass this. It would be April 1. And go to 23. So that's what that is. The blue and red and black writing are things that came up, I believe, since the last negotiation between Mag and Dennis. And we went back and forth a little bit on this, and that's reflected there. And as we took this to the board, it occurred to us we wanted a little more clarification, which you see in the green, about these maintenance and other improvement settlements. That's what is entailed there. On page, on paragraph 4 on taxes, is the next area. And there it said that landlord acknowledged as of April 1, 2021, and I assumed that the representation was to be effective, was a representation about now, a current representation. So that's changed to April 1, 2022. That's the only thing going on there. And in paragraph 5, the services provided. We still say lessee shall provide for all such services that are listed there. It's just that we didn't want to be hamstrung by the words at their own cost when we get so much in time service. So we don't actually pay somebody, but we provide for coverage of these things, and that's why we took it out at their cost, because it sounded like we were being held to actually write the check to someone when we might get into the trip like home law. Then in paragraph 8, on my copy, it's the top of page 3. We've had discussions about accessibility and other issues, and we felt shared to clarify that we agree about the accessibility issues with respect to what we're operating at the gallery, but we felt that again, as owner, if there were legal obligations under the law, not by operation of this lease, but simply if the town is otherwise obligated under the law to perform some duty here. We want to be sure that that wasn't switching to our duty. It's your duty under the law, that's fine. We assume all the other stuff that it was there. Again, red is not something we asked for. I think it's something that has been proposed to us. That's there. We did ask for your permanently blue and challenges our status. We would have rights to appeal until it's finalized. Now, number 9, maintenance is what picks up on Harry's discussion about David's concerns. David is here to address that. But we try to simply reflect that what we're talking about is normal maintenance that is generally recognized in commercial leases, and is something that doesn't generally involve capital improvements. That's something others do. We point out the language that we had earlier discussed, and I believe has no real argument with, is that we're going to try to be partners in getting things that the building needs to continue to be strong and be a good vendor. And so that stays, again, the red there is not something that we asked for, but is something that we came from town side of things. And then all the way at the bottom on mine, we wanted to clarify again this boundary of normal maintenance. And the last line, which I could tell was largely redundant anyway after a whole paragraph describing what everybody's duties were. The amended slightly full and sole responsibility to simply saying we assume responsibility for all these things as stated above, because they're all qualified above. To say that full and sole responsibility when we clearly apportion some of this. So that's that. And from there, I don't believe there are any changes in the rest of the document. So the very end of page 7, the end of the miscellaneous provision, we add a subpart double I. Page, the last couple words on the end of page 7, copy I have. And this is what is often seen in a lot of agreements. They're taking over from an existing agreement, and it tries to recognize that we're in a transition. And we didn't want there to be any confusion that by changing this lease in the middle of a lease year, that somehow we hadn't already paid the dollar rent for 2020. So that clarifies that. And it also clarifies that with respect to all that language in number 3 about getting credit for our maintenance expenses and improvements, that since this is now taking over, we should get credit for what we do this entire year for next year's rent. So that's all that transition language is. And we had a sense in our discussions with the board, it certainly sounded like we were on our way to actually making this building a very nice venue. And so we felt we didn't want it bought out from under us without having a shot. And that's all the number 30 is. that we're really not in the business of convincing foundations and citizens of this castle that we're here for the long haul. And want this thing, having disappear out from under us without a shot at the. So that's basic elements. You know, reflect on this and say things have gotten a little more complex, but we started at now 2 pages. It's inflated to 8 pages. I'm not sure how much we've advanced, how well it defines our relationship. We had a 65-year-old relationship that has worked on. I'll send it back to Barry at this point, or entertain any questions you have about what I'm doing.
Questions from the board?
I already asked mine. This hasn't gone back to the town's legal counsel, so I'm not willing to do any work on this tonight. I understand what's written, and I just want to hear a legal opinion from.
Just to check, just to be able to say whatever was added is perfectly fine.
I spent 5 minutes with it. I'm not, I'm gonna go home and read the whole thing, start to finish again from scratch, so I have it all fresh in my mind as well. It's just, I can't make a decision on a 20-year lease.
Well, it's not that our lawyer isn't worth $400 an hour, but it doesn't look like a whole lot is added. It's too different, except for the last first right of refusal, and I think that's a normal thing to add, since they have put so much into the building.
Okay, any public comment on? Jim?
We have a topic.
No, I submitted a copy.
Here, you can one.
I'm just fair warning, I'm gonna keep any public comments 5 minutes, just like we do in normal session, and we'll go through again if we have to, but just letting folks know.
I spent a good part of my professional career overlooking cooperative agreements of this nature of leases of historic structures. And I spent a great deal of time going over earlier drafts of this and preparing written recommendations and proposed amendments that I felt would safeguard the town's interests for continued preservation of this structure and to make sure that the partnership is properly guided by proper language. I formally requested in writing that this be included as a document for this meeting next time we discuss the main art gallery. And once again, it was not. So what I've circulated to you now is a revised amended one, sticking primarily to the key points that deal with the preservation and management of this building. And they're key points, my comments, my page and a half of comments are key to 5 elements within the last version of the agreement. So I never saw what was just put out tonight until a few minutes ago. But the ones I've commented on in writing aren't really affected too much by this, but I want to bring your attention to the rent section relating to the maintenance, repair, renewals. I had highlighted alterations, additions, and obligations, and specifically said that those are not preservation related, and alterations and additions can actually be contrary to preservation needs. And improvements such as putting in track lighting or putting in a restroom or whatever, air conditioning, are not preservation activities that should be credited against the rent. The money should be put towards real preservation activities. So I recommend that those 3 points be struck from financial credits. On number 2, the term, or excuse me,
Turn number 3.
yeah, thank you. On number 3, the language that's currently in it that mentions the National Register is gobbledygook. It means nothing to preservation field. It's 501.
Excuse me.
I said the language referring to the National Register, 5, small Roman numeral 7. I recommend that be struck to replace language that reflects true preservation criteria for what's considered professional levels of preservation activity, which is Secretary standards under section 106. And that language is in my amendment memo. On number 4, at the annual year, the only document tenant is asked to provide is a copy of its IRS Form 990. Well, anyone who works in the not-for-profit field knows that if an organization does not incur income exceeding $50,000 a year, all they have to do is turn in a postcard. So what does that tell the Board of Selectmen about how monies are expended or what's going on in the structure? It tells you nothing. At the very basis, in any of these agreements, an organization such as this is normally asked to provide its annual financial statement, its list of board members, and its annual report of activities. And if there have been amendments or changes since their constitution and bylaws have been last given to the board, any amendments or changes should also be given at the beginning of the year, so you're all aware of changes. Finally, under 5B and 5A, I was very concerned that there was no responsibility for ensuring the structure, which is almost always put in these types of agreements. If this building was destroyed by fire, and more often than not, when historic structures are destroyed, it's during the case of improvements. Somebody leaves an electrical outlet with something hot in it, whatever. If this burns down, who is responsible for the restoration work? Who's going to pay for that? If this is like any other town, we don't have an insurance policy in the structure, we're self-insured. When we let other parties use that structure to their programs, they are normally required to carry insurance for the property. Otherwise, this town loses a very important historic structure that cannot be replicated. Thank you.
Others who would like to speak?
I'd like to.
And I should have reminded before, if you can just say your name for the people online.
I'm Wendy Ross, a resident of Wiscasset. I'm the president of the Art Gallery Board of Trustees. And I think it's extremely important that we get this 20-year lease so we can continue to get grants that really will help the building, help the town. And so we won't get into a situation where the building is falling into further and further disrepair. So I'm here to ask you to approve the lease before you. To help preserve and maintain the historic 1807 building, receiving financial grants is extremely important, but almost impossible unless the grantor knows that the town's commitment to the gallery is extended and an enduring one. That's why we're asking you to approve a 20-year lease between the town and the gallery. The gallery is an historic jewel in downtown Wiscasset, and working with the town, we intend to keep it as such. The gallery was founded in 1958 by Wiscasset resident Albert Burridge in the old Academy building, where I studied briefly in the late 1940s as a kindergarten student. The gallery is a nonprofit 501c3 organization dedicated to the advancement and preservation of the visual, fine, and applied arts through exhibitions, lectures, demonstrations, and educational programs for children and adults. And I can assure you that this board has been working very, very hard to make the programs and the exhibits the best that we possibly can. As an incorporated nonprofit, the main art gallery first and foremost displays art, both of emerging artists as well as nationally known ones. Our exhibits are diverse in the types of art displayed. It could be paintings, photos, fiber art, sculpture, or other artistic mediums. During the last few years, the gallery has achieved prominence as an important venue between Portland and Rockland for showcasing contemporary Maine-based artists. Our exhibits held from May through October are free and start with an evening reception with food, drink, and music, open to the public, and the receptions bring many members out from the local and surrounding communities. In the memory of the art gallery's founder, Mildred Burridge, I want to see the gallery continue to succeed. For that to happen, it's important that the town acknowledge the value the gallery brings to Wiscasset, and that you, select men and women, approve the lease before you. Thank you for letting me address.
Thank you. Would like to speak?
I just, Terry Hadley, Main Art Gallery. I don't see anything that we can't do that is a concern with Mr. Kochan. We're working with Les Fossil in the 1772 Foundation. We're waiting word on that grant to do a very specific plan for the remainder of the grants that we want to write and what priorities there are. I mean, this is very well thought out, and very well planned. We're happy to provide financial statements. We already have in our budget this year. And again, I think it was noted that this year alone, we're contributing $10,000 towards the maintenance of the building. And it was for grant matches, and it was for regular maintenance expenses. If you add in Mr. David Pope, man extraordinaire, who very quietly really has maintained that building for I don't know how many years now. And I can't even put a value on David Pope, but he is valuable. And it means a lot. And I think, again, he was thrilled that we got this latest grant. And again, we just want to see it go forward. We got this latest grant because we told the Davis Foundation that there was a very strong, overwhelming vote by the townspeople of Wiscasset that want to see the gallery have a 20-year lease. So remember who you're listening to here. There was a vote, and it was positive for us. And then we, when I wrote this grant, I said it was safe that they check. Both organizations, 1772 and Davis check. What is the status of the lease? And I was as transparent as possible. I said, it was voted on and approved by the residents, and now we're working out the details. At the time, we thought those details would be worked out by January. We are now in April, or almost May, and it just feels awful to keep this going and going, and a lot of time and effort for the most part. Thank you.
Dave Pope, Wiscasset resident, a little embarrassed about the accolades, but I have been involved with the building pretty intimately for a while, and when we got the last grant proposals out that were turned down because of the short lease we have, we took great care in contacting the powers that be in the restoration world. And that included the National Park Service and the state equivalent.
And I can't remember the details of the names of the people or anything, but we contacted those people, and we worked with them to make sure the language was appropriate and that we would be doing the right thing by the builders. And I presume we would continue with that mindset. And I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than the way it's stated in the lease, that we would pay attention to those things. Thank you.
Thank you.
I missed what-
I'd like to do all public comment, and we'll come back
Okay.
to the board if that works.
There's another question.
Yeah, there's a question.
Can we get this to legal and back by our next meeting?
I'm sorry, what?
Can we get this to legal and back by our next meeting? The answer
So
was
that we
yes.
can vote.
Because I really was prepared to vote on this tonight.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's a 20-year contract. And
Yeah.
And I was prepared to vote before 11 a.m. this morning, but
It's
now
okay.
there
Well,
are.
It's the same thing as 11 a.m. this morning, right?
Well, what was in the packet was not, because they
No.
sent the updated one today, so.
No, the one that we got this morning.
Right, and I just said before
Emails.
11 a.m. I was ready to vote. Further public comment?
Okay.
I congratulate the gallery on what they've been doing, and I'm very happy to learn about the new grants. What I'm concerned about is people move on, new people come in. Those of us who are here tonight may recollect things differently. New parties come on board and interpret things differently. Let things are properly spelled out. There are going to be problems down the road. And unless we have the proper language in the agreement that assures proper standards of preservation, which are currently lacking throughout, we are stymieing and causing serious problems potentially down the road. Not everyone's going to have the same ideas of what are standard preservation techniques. Someone might say, oh, the windows are problematic. Let's replace them in vinyl. Well, that is not a preservation ethic for a National Register and Historic American Building Survey building. It's replaced in kind. This is what Section 106 guides. You don't put Portland cement in soft mortar brick buildings. It destroys the masonry work. It happens all the time when people mean well, but don't understand the proper techniques of preservation. It's great that the current grant and the team that are working on that are going to create some guidelines, but it's incumbent on the select board, not the MEG, to ensure that the town's historic structure is preserved and puts criteria in place to ensure for perpetuity. Thank you.
Dennis, then.
Jim, I sent you all what section 106 is that Jim's referring to. Jim clarified for me, these are not required standards.
They're the standards that are accepted throughout the entire United States, the entire preservation community. All the states adopted them. Most localities that have any preservation ethos have adopted them. We had them actually at one time in the short-lived preservation ordinance we had. And now the town has abrogated any responsibility for those types of standards in managing its buildings by lack of not having them.
Okay, that was done by the town. And the town said, we don't want this historic preservation ordinance, we're doing away with it.
That's the ordinance, so that's for people's property.
And the same with the Historic Preservation Commission, where people had to come before what's essentially section 106 is and say, this is what we want to do, are we okay with that? And the town said, nope, we don't want to do that anymore.
Well, I'll speak to that too. The problem was the ordinance should have never been put out the way it was because it was incomplete. There were no standards to apply, so people were interpreting it the way they felt. And that was always an issue. And, you know, I would have never approved an ordinance like that to begin with, but it's what people had to live with for a while. And it's gone now. But what I'm saying to you as the select board, this is a town resource. This isn't somebody's private property on High Street or on Pleasant Street. This is a town building. It's our most important historic structure, and we need to safeguard it. We need to have those standards in place.
Richard Reese. I know the previous quick response to this. First, we have a track record, and yes, people have changed. We've had over 100 different board members over the years. We've had how many different selectmen over the years, and here we still stand 65 years later. Good work. So I think that we have a track record that the voters recognize and voters empower. No, it didn't dictate the specifics, but at the time, we had an existing lease. All we were all trying to do was extend it. Ended up with 8 pages of a lot of black and white, some of which people can miss, but in section 9, there is a provision that if landlord determines in its sole discretion that the planned maintenance or repair would have a detrimental impact on the historic quality of the building, landlord may require tenants to revise that. It may not meet the T's and dotted I's, but it provides for protection. And I think that's the motivation that's really behind Mr. Kosham's objection. Let's have some possibility of oversight. And I would put it to you that it is already in this document. And finally, I'm not sure that the town has proposed actual rental numbers here that is predicated on being compensated just for the historic value of the building. It's for occupying the building and all that it represents, and consequently all the things that we do to meet our legal obligations in section 8 and maintenance obligations in section 9 should be recognized as benefits to the town. We can use remaining in it, and I don't think it needs to be limited, as he's suggesting, to just historic preservation. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, and there hasn't been a grant that we've applied for, even prior to myself, where the grantor didn't specify and we didn't provide. We do it automatically. It has to be approved by the main jurisdiction for, my brain's a blank tonight too, but there's a main
Historic preservation.
Thank you. And we go before them and they review it and they approve it. And we go before the national organization and again, we're consulting with Les Fossil. So I don't think there could be any more oversight than what we do. We would never do anything that wouldn't be the right thing for the building. Thank you.
I know none of us want to drag this out anymore and I feel bad that I don't want to vote on this tonight, but I just feel like no matter what it is, if we're going into a 20-year contract, I want the lawyers to see the exact language. And so I'll only speak for myself, but I just want to make it clear that I am in favor of us going into this partnership, but I want to make sure that we're doing it exactly right. So, and I'm sorry that for the whole process in terms of it's taken so long, but if we get to the outcome where everybody feels confident about this, then I think that was worth it. So, other questions from the board? Or Dennis?
Go ahead.
Dusty?
Well, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, the 20-year agreement is, the way I see it, the voters have authorized it. What we're trying to do is approve the language of the contract. So that said, I want to say thank you to the main art gallery folks for their patience in working with us to get a good lease, which I think this is. Everything's got to be formal and done absolutely correctly these days. I was just telling Charlotte before the meeting that when I first moved to Maine, my voter registration card was handwritten, which I thought was really cool. We don't do things that way anymore. So I read this earlier today when I came in, and I don't think the changes that you're asking for, sorry, my voice is going. I don't think they changed things a lot except for the right of first refusal, which I think is reasonable, so. I'll be looking forward to voting for next meeting as well. But thank you for working with us on this. And thank you, Jim, for your contribution as well.
Is there anything in this that you want to change before I send it to the attorney?
Yeah, because what I want to avoid is I don't want a same day.
This has consumed an awful lot of my time.
I just want to make sure there are no more questions. Okay.
No, I would just like to thank
I
also.
would have voted for 20 years at $1. I mean, like this, I would have approved it 6 months ago, so whatever.
What were you saying?
All I wanted to say was thank you, especially to the chairman, and especially to a man who really doesn't want to be recognized, with David Pope, who has done so much for, you know, for absolutely nothing, because he loves that book. And thank you to Karen. And thank you to people who came in to witness to this particular time. If I shut up.
Very, very quickly, and then
It's very short, it's just an idea. Gathering that there are 3 people or 4 that have said they will vote for it if the attorney approves it as is. Could we take a vote on it if the attorney approves
I'm
it?
not.
I wish we could, but we can't.
All right.
I tried that.
Just. Pam?
I was just wondering if that 60-day period for right of refusal is a common time period. If that's the usual amount of time, if you just check into that, I don't want to start a whole nother discussion on it, but just that one thing. Just that time period it's out right there, if that's kind of the standard or not.
Tell you that I reached out to a bunch of other towns. They're probably not buildings on historic register, but they were historic buildings that leased to nonprofits. And the language of this lease is very similar to every one of them that I got back. I got 6 of them, 3 of them were for $1, 1 was for nothing. And the others had some provision for something similar to this.
But I shared with you others that did have those provisions.
I get that. I shared with them section 106. They want to put it in here, I'm happy to do so, but that's not my decision to make.
No,
All right, do we need a vote to? No, we just tell you,
I'll just
go
do it.
back.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, 10, new business, A, suggested revisions to Article 4, Ports and Harbor Ordinance. I know Susan, you're online.
Yep.
And am I correct, it's just, there's the 3.1.1, 3.10, and 3.11, is that correct? The ones that are highlighted, or they're gray in our, does that sound right? Yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Did anyone want to speak to the change? Susan, did you want? Okay.
Do you have questions?
So I think it would just be good to let the board know why you're pushing this forward.
Sure. So we're,
Would you, sorry, you might.
I guess I could get up, but I'm not gonna stand behind the podium because I'm a little short, so. So we're slowly working towards the online warrant process. In that, we have opened many cans of worms. I read through a lot of different ordinances that other towns have. Part of it is that we want to be able to make sure that what we have online matches our ordinance. So if we're telling someone on their permit application that their mooring has been inspected, which is a later change, we want to just have it in the ordinance that we're asking them to, that we're requiring them to have it inspected every 3 years. There was lots of different options. I went with just a very basic, we're asking you to do this, it's part of the ordinance. It will allow us to enforce it and make sure that it's taken care of properly. And they're in every other ordinance that I read. The first change or addition, and those two are both additions, they're not changes to anything that's already there, just says that if you don't pay for your mooring, if you don't pay that mooring permit fee after a year, we can have that mooring removed. It will help make sure that money is coming in, and that if there's someone who wants a mooring that will pay, we'll get it in there.
Questions? Oh, sorry.
Under 3.10, should it be in here that the expense of the inspection is the responsibility of the mooring owner?
It should be. I thought I wrote that.
Yeah,
maybe
it
I
says
didn't.
it, and it was expense.
Oh, does it?
Oh,
Second
yeah.
sentence.
By qualifying
And-
at the owner's expense.
Oh, okay, yeah. I
For
see it.
whatever it's
Okay.
worth, it's already being done. People already get them inspected and pay for it and all of that. This will just kind of line everything up.
Yeah, now makes sense to me.
Thank you. Alright. Any further questions? Alright, so we need to go to refer it to the ordinance review committee.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. This will go to the ORC. All right, 10B, peer vendor applications approved by the waterfront committee. I did have a question. There were multiple ones that didn't have a check mark on which permit it was. That was more of just, that needs to be recorded.
Okay, they're all vendors or returning vendors.
Right, but like, Chamber of Commerce, Watershed, and the River Shack don't have, doesn't say which permit.
Okay. I may have checked it when we did their interview. You have the originals and yeah.
It was more just that we should have a record of it.
I'm sorry?
We need to have a record of it. It doesn't matter to me either one, but it's just missing.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. You're breaking up and my dog is barking.
You just need that permit for each spot filled in either way.
Oh, the permit for each spot?
It's not, the $1,000 or $1,500 is not checked off on the three ladder.
Okay, because most of them are returning vendors and Frank's should be checked off and the one down on the recreational pier, the new River Shack, they're a small spot too. I could have sworn I checked all those off.
We're a big spot
Yeah. Okay.
in the river shed.
Yeah. Alrighty.
That's good, because that means you pay more money.
All right. Questions? Public comment, Kim?
Kim Dolce. I would ask you to hold off on voting on this tonight until you have a chance to review pier rents. Currently, seasonal rents are $1,000 for the smaller space, the 10 by 20, and $1,500 for 30 by 34. Commercial rents are typically based on square footage, which puts the smaller space in Wiscasset at $5 a square foot for the season, and the larger ones at $1.47. That's a difference of 340%. The previous board accepted these recommended fees from the waterfront committee without question, but you should ask why there's such a disparity in the two spaces. Several years ago, someone at Lincoln County Planning gathered pier rental rates from other communities around the state, and the average fee for those that responded was $5,600 per season. Rockland came in well below the average, charging $3,000 per season, which translates to $15 a square foot. You might argue that Rockland is a much larger town with a more active waterfront. If that's the case, then certainly our $5 a square foot in Wiscasset for the smaller space is a bargain. If it is a bargain, then why isn't that the rate for the larger space? I ask that you bring Wiscasset pier rates closer to parity with other towns in Maine and eliminate the inequity that does not serve the town. Collecting reasonable fees for use of town property and town services will help boost revenue. That should include the often overlooked and sometimes waived vendor fees for single day events like Art Walk and Farmers Market. Thank you.
I move to approve the pier vendor permit applications of Sprague's Lobster, Industrial Maine LLC, Wiscasset Area Chamber of Commerce, The Potter's Shed, Wiscasset Railway Museum, and the River Shack as recommended by the Waterfront Committee.
Second. Any questions or discussion? Pam?
Yeah, I do think it would be a good idea. I don't have a problem passing this now, but I do think it would be a good idea for the town to look at the disparity in prices per square footage. I mean, that really is a standard that businesses, some businesses are run by on rental. And I think if you're doing it all on one year, that should be somewhere.
Are these fees included in what Waterfront Committee is looking at that we asked them? Or is that?
No, that was just the borrowing fees.
All right.
I support the Waterfront Committee looking at those fees again, and I feel like that would be the place where your comments would be appropriate, Kim Dolce.
Jesse?
Yeah, I wanted to jump on that too and say, yeah, I think we should do that. I don't think we should hold these vendors' applications up to do it. I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Calling for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. 10C, State of Maine Bureau of Highway 2022 Maine e-citation printer equipment grant.
I just explained that.
I move to authorize, Police Chief Lawrence Hasseltine to execute the sub-grant contract for the 2022 Maine e-citation printer equipment grant.
Second. Any questions or discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. 10D, Farmers Market proposed new location. We have a new map. Looks good to me. We don't have to approve again, right?
No, I just wanted you guys to see the original one that you had in here. I expressed some concerns about because they would actually have to be parking on the lawn. And I didn't feel it was appropriate for them to park on the lawn. I was afraid it would do damage, so we reconfigured it so that we wouldn't have to park on the lawn.
It's actually be even closer to traffic in terms of people seeing it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. 10E, peer policy revisions. Who's in charge of this? Susan, is that you too? No?
Susan.
Okay. Susan, did you want to explain to us what changes there are?
Sure. So mostly what we did was come up with policies for the both peers and sectioned it off into like day use policies, event policies, and then the vendor policies. And we updated the electrical billing to use the circuit reader more effectively. And like that. And then we came up with a little bit of a process of how things go for new vendors and things like that. So I presume that since they've been approved for this year, then Kathy will send an invoice.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So we did not review the fees at all. We are happy to do that, if that's your wish, before these get reapproved. That's fine.
I think it sounds like there's a consensus. We would like you to go back and take a look at those.
Okay. Okay, great.
Fair to say? Okay, so then with that, we should hold off on approval for the revisions. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Do you need a motion to table this?
I just make a motion to send it back to the ORC, to the waterfront.
Okay. So
Okay.
moved. To send it back to the waterfront committee.
All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. All right, 10F, monthly financials. Any questions, comments? Seeing none. Our managers report. Anything you want to add to us or any questions for them? Right.
Face about it too.
Number 12, assessor's business supplemental for John Libby, R03, lot 29, for $15,634.16. Looking for a motion.
I move to approve the supplement for John Libby as recommended by the assessor agent.
A second. Any questions or discussion?
Just taking land out of tree growth, is that on this?
Yeah, I can say that. And it's a supplemental bill, so he owes us money.
All those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. All right. We are now on to an executive session. Do we anticipate a vote afterwards? There will be no vote afterwards, so. Entertain a motion.
I move that we enter executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 4056C.
All those in favor? Moving into executive session at 7:12 p.m.
Are we gonna shut down the Zoom?
Will we go in the other
Well, it
room?
depends. People are gonna hang around. But everybody's gonna
I think
leave. except for
Susan just left.
Susan just left. We can
Yeah.
shut down.
And we can write down the time and come out for Jackie.
Yes. Jackie, we can write down the adjourn votes and